Hi, I'm Justin Scoble, the Vice President of Technical Operations at Caribou Biosciences. We're developing CRISPR genome-edited allogeneic CAR T cells. So I oversee our process development, analytical development, and manufacturing teams and our supply chain function at Caribou. And we're really trying to expand access to CAR T cells by making them off the shelf.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kumar Karyam-Pudi. I'm a Senior Director of Cell Therapies at Moffitt Cancer Center. I oversee a CGMP cell and vector manufacturing group at Moffitt Cancer Center. It's a group of 80 people that handles a wide variety of cell therapy products as well as early-stage vector manufacturing. I'm glad to be part of this panel. Looking forward to exciting discussion.
Good morning, everyone. Nikki Bishop. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Customer Experience for Emerson's Life Sciences software portfolio. And all this week, when I meet somebody, they say, Emerson, oh, that Emerson. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, that Emerson. Emerson Electric is the larger company, but we focus on manufacturing and automation software solutions for optimization in manufacturing.
Good morning. I'm Greg Nyberg, Chief Technology Officer at Landmark Bio. Landmark is a US-based contract development and manufacturing organization that specializes in the advanced therapy space, especially in the translational area. We're recently acquired by Artis Biosolutions, so we're part of the Artis Biosolutions group.
Hi, everyone. I'm Po, Yetrin Po. Tolerance Bio is a new startup. It's only been around for about 1.5 to 2 years, and we are a therapeutic company with 2 different platforms. The first is a regenerative medicine platform using iPSCs to differentiate into thymic cells. We're trying to regenerate the thymus. And another platform is a monoclonal antibody platform where we're using a monoclonal antibody to preserve the involution of the thymus to prevent atrophy. So we're looking forward to this discussion.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So we basically have organized the talk into 3 sections, we'll say. So we kind of looked at it from the development pathway. So the first series of questions are going to be more about kind of the early stage, getting to phase 1. The second series of questions are going to be a little bit after your phase 1 when you're approaching pivotal. And then we'll talk a little bit about preparing for commercial production towards the end. There may be time for Q&A at the end. If there's not, maybe ask the panelists could just stand by for about 5 minutes after the session to answer any questions that you might have that we don't get to. So that being said, so I'll go to the first, again, talking about kind of development to phase 1, being tech transfer session. First question is, how soon do you start planning a tech transfer? Is that something that you have in mind from the beginning, that looking forward, you'll have to transfer it somewhere else eventually, or do you kick that off when the need arises? So I'll start maybe, I guess, Justin, you want to take that one?
Sure, thanks. So planning for tech transfer is something, if you want to actually develop a drug, you're going to need to do. Most small biotechs or startups can't afford to do their own manufacturing, and so you're going to have to transfer your process to a CDMO. And in order to do that, I think it's really important to invest in your process development and your analytical development capabilities internally so that you know how to make your product and then how to analyze it in a way that you know what good looks like and that you can maintain those critical quality attributes. So, I think it's important to invest early in that with tech transfer in mind so that you can make a GMP-compatible process and scalable. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect for your phase 1s, but it needs to be, at least somewhat compatible with the GMP principles. And then further tech transfer is going to happen later as you scale up and progress down your pipeline. So, I think that's a really critical part, focusing on that, on getting it ready for that tech transfer. And once you have invested, and that the tech transfer can go much more smoothly and quickly.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Maybe Po, do you want to weigh in?
Sure, yeah. I've developed several cell therapy products over the course of my career, and tech transfer has always been something that people talk about. When do you actually start tech transfer? Some companies actually have what they call stage gating, internally, where they actually see, okay, when you hit certain milestones or you hit certain things, then you start the tech transfer process. But there is a certain balance that needs to be happening. During the research process, you can't just wait for the researchers to finish their research before you actually start doing the tech transfer. You need to start with the end in mind. You need to develop something that is actually manufacturable. Otherwise, there's no point doing those research. So you need to have that early engagement. But then there's always that balance, right? When do you actually start doing the tech transfer? And when you do a tech transfer, when you actually do your scale up, your process development, your analytical development, when do you actually start it and how do you actually go about it? And that's where phase appropriateness comes in, right? You need to make sure that you're doing something phase appropriate. And the reason why I say that is because if you were to try to start developing a process for commercial applications, the cost for developing that process is going to be extremely high, and most startup companies will not be able to do that. So you need to be phase appropriate in the sense that, yes, you want to develop something that can be translated into a commercial skill, but at the same time, you don't want to be spending all your resources up front. You need to start showing clinical data before you actually put more resources into it. So when you actually start doing your tech transfer, you need to really have in mind, yes, we want to be phase appropriate, but at the same time, we want to be able to show comparability if we were to actually scale up in the future. So all those things need to come into play very early on in the process, in the life cycle of the product itself. Instead of waiting, oh, that's later down the line, we can push it down the line. No, you need to start thinking about it now in the early part.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in on that one, or we'll go next?
Well, just to add to what Justin and Poe mentioned, we all know for cell therapy product, there are always multiple tech transfers that are inherent to any product. So, like as Justin addressed already, from day one, from the time of process development, you got to keep in mind the tech transfer. This product is going to be transferred somewhere else to scale up or to support late stage manufacturing. So you got to keep that in mind when you're developing the processes in the lab, which will be helpful in the future tech transfers related to that product.
Thank you. Okay, next question on this track here is, probably a long-standing question, I guess, is how do you decide between outsourcing the work and then manufacturing in-house? I think it's something people always have interest in. Two-part question, and if you do outsource that manufacturing, how do you select the right CDMO for your particular stage of development? Either Poe or Justin, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, happy to go first. This is a big question, right? Build versus buy. If we were to be 5 years, 6 years ago when the biotech industry was booming, you would see that there are so many companies building their own manufacturing facilities. Why is that so? Well, first of all, there was a constraint in manufacturing capacity. There was not enough capacity there. So a lot of people, because of being able to control your timeline, being able to control how you actually go about the manufacturing, keeping the knowledge in-house, they end up building their own manufacturing facility. It's extremely costly, but the benefits long-term may actually be good. But then at the same time, you look at it now, 5 years later, 6 years later, there are all these manufacturing facilities that were built that are now sitting empty. There's an excess in capacity, and there are so many things that you can actually outsource, and you didn't need to spend all the capital up front to build your own manufacturing facility. And this is where I think the industry really needs to come to grips with it. We are no longer in the booming days of biotech. Everyone can admit that investor sentiment in cell therapy, gene therapy is actually a little lackluster right now. So how do we actually go about our manufacturing? Do we buy, do we source, or do we build? And many of the CDMOs are still operating under the mentality where we were 5, 6 years ago. Hey, you want to manufacture? You have to pay a slot reservation fee. And then when you walk through their clean room facility, majority of the slots are empty. You're still operating under that mentality where, hey, we have to have that slot reservation because that's how we just operate. You got to start changing your mindset and go with the flow of the times now. And then as far as therapeutic developers are concerned, they also need to start seeing that, okay, what are the benefits for me to actually build in-house versus outsource? I would say majority of the companies right now, because of the capital intensity of building, is outsourcing to CDMOs. When you outsource it, yeah, you lose certain control, but there are also certain advantages to that whereby you are going to be able to ensure reproducibility. If you can tech transfer something out of your company and being able to reproduce it by a third-party independent CDMO, the value of your proposition actually goes up instead of saying that I can only do it in-house and no one else can repeat it.
Yeah, and to that end, there's also, of course, different, plasmid, vector cell, there's different pieces that you could outsource one or the other, I take it, so. Anyone else want to jump into this, or Justin?
I agree with everything Poe said. I can't imagine in this economy that early stage companies would be building their own manufacturing facility to support their preclinical or early stage assets. The demand is so low that it really isn't cost effective to build out that capability, and then operate it for a few doses so that you can go through your dose escalation safety studies. It doesn't really make any mathematical sense. So then it's a matter of finding the right partner for your stage of development, and I think there's lots of opportunities in these early phase academic CDMOs like Kumar's, where you can get in there. They have phase appropriate capabilities to help you kind of get your first in human clinical data. Maybe you're not going to commercialize out of that facility, and you're going to have to plan for a future tech transfer, but at least you'll probably get the attention and the expertise that you're looking for to help kind of transition from that researchy type process to a GMP-compatible process.
Thank you. So keeping on this track here, this question is probably best for Nikki. So you mentioned automation and software. So how do you integrate technology like that early on, and then have it so that you can transfer that when you need to?
I think the easiest answer is just start, right? What we heard Poe say earlier is a lot of things that we do, or the industry does, we do because that's how we've always done it. And so it's one of those, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, things about commercial manufacturing and technology and data integration and all of that. But the reality is we're on the bridge together, right? The bridge starts in R&D. It starts in some of these early ideas. And I think the misnomer is that the commercial manufacturing space and those things are heavy and expensive and we can't afford it right now, and we can't stop, right? We can't pause to take the time to figure that out because we're just trying to figure out, does the science work? But the reality is there's small things that you can do very early on while you're trying to figure out if the science works that helps you prepare for the long term. Things like data capture, right? Are you writing it down? Your team's writing it down on paper, which I understand when you're in the thick of it, and the mad scientist approach, you're just trying to get through it. Could you capture that in a spreadsheet, right? You're probably all expecting me to say you need a fancy data fabric and all the things. And while, yes, I do believe that's true at some point, sometimes it starts with just very simple digital data capture, right? It could be using your phone to dictate the text that will stick it in a spreadsheet for you. Because the things that you're capturing early on in the process, you're capturing those decisions, right? It's knowledge around decisions. It's not necessarily a number that you can look back and track. It's how did you make the decision? Why did you make that decision? So that when you get to that commercial manufacturing and scale, you have the science is nailed, and you're not transferring the science, you're just making it scalable. So my answer is always start simple, start small, and ask some of those people who are in commercial manufacturing, some of the large pharma. They will share the information, right? What's working? What do you wish? What do they wish they had done early on to better enable themselves? I know we talk to customers, producers all the time, and it's like, well, if I had just done X, right, I wouldn't be on this 2, 3, 5-year delay of getting this to market. So, ask the questions and find those very simple, small, scalable solutions that you can implement early, and just try it. There's a lot out there. Obviously, we'd be happy to talk to you about it, but figure out what those small things are and just start. And build it into the culture, right? So that everybody who is in that R&D space and in that space is thinking, what can I be doing today to make this scalable in the future? I mean, it's commercial scalability too.
Great point. Thank you.
So maybe building off of that, I think picking a good partner early on to kind of help you on that journey is also important. I think one thing that the right manufacturing partners can do is help you understand kind of what the journey is going to look like as you get towards commercialization. If you have experience in commercialization, what are the steps, incremental steps you can take towards setting a foundation that will allow you to use more automated tools as you go further in development. But maybe the imperative early on is often let's get to the clinic as quickly as possible. I don't want to change the process all that much, but if you can engage with manufacturing partners early, you can get feedback on, okay, what aspects of your manufacturing process are maybe going to be challenging to scale? What might you think about doing differently very early on? So one thing we do, kind of building on the points that Justin and Poe made earlier, was we'll engage with partners very early on maybe a team supply run they need to on one of the earlier milestones that they have, transferring the process to us. We run it, we make material for a team supply. Our partners learn about, okay, what did we learn from the process there that then we could think about as we get along the journey going towards getting to a more clinical solution. But we can also help think through what are the bite-sized chunks of how can you run the process now that sets it up so that you can automate it and you can have a more streamlined commercial process down the road. So I think having a good partner to kind of walk you through that's very important.
Thank you. So the next question is kind of the other side. We talked about technology, and it's kind of the other side of that. I think, Nikki, as you said, writing things down is key, so it kind of relates to that. Looking at the more human side of tech transfer, you have a lot of institutional knowledge. You have a developer maybe in a lab, especially in academic environment. There's a lot of knowledge about the product and about the process early on. So how do you make sure you capture that knowledge and make sure that you can transfer all of that, almost what's not written down, but be able to transfer some of that wisdom to another supplier, another site? I'm going to ask maybe Kumar to jump on that one first.
Yeah, sure. I think the quick answer is with a mindset, you should have a mindset that tech transfer is not one-off activity. It's a collaboration between sending site and receiving site. And also, the personnel involved in tech transfer, you got to, the talented people who are part of the tech transfer, especially at the receiving site, you got to use those members as a mechanism, a critical part of this tech transfer. You got to use them as a mechanism. And to outline this into 3 items probably, one is tacit knowledge. Tech transfer is a complex process, and BPRs, SOPs, they're all part of tech transfer. These are all standard things that are part of tech transfer. But the tacit knowledge, the institutional knowledge or the site knowledge in handling the products is extremely important. And do we have a paperwork to support that? No, usually we don't. People have that in their mind. So you got to make the best use of the tacit knowledge. Maybe you can have a documentation of what worked so far in the last 10 years with these products, what didn't work. You got to keep that tacit knowledge documented. That's one thing. That's very important. The second thing is you can't PowerPoint your way through tech transfer. You can't. You have a tech transfer kickoff meeting where you have PowerPoint presentation, and you are like, okay, we are handing it off to you. It doesn't work like that. You have to have personnel involved with shadowing the processes. The people from the receiving site should go to the sending site, spend time, observe the processes. Also, the personnel from the sending site, they should come to the receiving site when they are setting up the process transfer. When they are setting up the transfer, they have to come to the receiving site. They have to be part of first 2 validation runs or something. So the shadowing is extremely critical. Just don't use PowerPoints and say you're done. The third one is you got to have redundancies. Like the group that I run, the manufacturing group, it's a team of 80 people. It's been around from last 16, 17 years. Moffitt has been manufacturing cellular products from almost 17 years. So there are some people in my group who are extremely talented, who's been there with the group from last 17 years. They have worked with TIL, they have worked with CAR-Ts, different type of CAR-Ts. But can I depend on that one person, 2 persons, 2 people to be experts? No. I got to build the redundancies. So I have to have replicas of those members, like who have expertise. So you have to build redundancies. So all these are very important to manage the tech transfers and maintain the memory across multiple sites.
Thank you. Justin, you want to?
I'm going to, echo. I think that's great. We've done this very successfully in our labs, where we've brought folks from the PD team or the MSAT team at our CDMOs out to our facility, see how it's done. Generating the batch record. Taking our batch records, updating it to their own language, translating it to what makes sense for their manufacturing team. And then bringing that back to their facilities, and then we, of course, go out. And then, I can't emphasize enough. I think it's really important to have a person in plant for every run, not just the first couple, just so that you're there, you have eyes on. If there's anything that comes up, we have the expertise who can help troubleshoot if anything goes wrong. And it's a close collaboration, and one of the things that the travel back and forth does is it helps build camaraderie between the two teams and the partnerships between our CDMO partners and us as developers, and it really helps.
Thank you. Anyone else on that one, or we'll go on to the next one? Okay. Next few questions are going to be more about, so after you've gotten to phase one, more for like the more mature programs, when you're going phase two to pivotal kind of stage, and I think it was mentioned earlier about striking a balance between process and analytical phase appropriateness, and then your intent to go commercial eventually. So maybe I think it was Poe, you mentioned that, or yeah.
Yeah, process and analytical development are absolutely critical for cell and gene therapy, right? For even biologics. What are you measuring? But at the same time, you need to know your product and which phase it is in. And when I say that, what do I mean by that? A lot of companies right now, those who have been following the news would know that there's been a lot of industries or a lot of companies kind of doing things in China, doing things in Asia. It's cheaper, it's faster. There are also a lot of licensing deals happening from Asia coming into the US. And why is that the case? A lot of this kind of boils down, in my opinion at least, to the process and analytical development, understanding what is really necessary during that early phase clinical trial versus the later stage. You can always do comparability studies later on, but it's really how much do you want to spend later on as compared to investing up front. So take, for example, there are a lot of things that the industry has really pushed, and it's kind of been accepted as norms. But from a regulatory perspective, it's not really required. And when you actually dig into some of those things, so take, for example, right, a lot of people are talking about potency assay for cell therapy. It's a critical aspect. What is the mechanism of action? What are you showing biological activity? But is that truly needed for your first phase? No, technically it's not. Yeah, you might be shooting yourself in the foot in the future, but at the same time, there have been some companies that I've been part of whereby you invest so much in trying to develop a potency assay, you take so long to get to clinic, by the time you show proof of concept in human, you're already several years behind compared to someone who's actually just, let me be phase appropriate here, let me show clinical efficacy, let me show that it works first in patients, and then I worry about that later on. There is a balance. I'm not saying that you shouldn't think about it. There is a balance that you have to strike. You need to be able to invest sufficiently so that you can actually bridge it to the future. But at the same time, don't spend all your eggs, don't put all your eggs in one basket right now to the point at which you cripple yourself. It's far more valuable, especially for smaller, younger biotech startups, to actually show clinical proof of concept, get investors to be interested in your program. They will pour money into it, and then in the future, you can bridge that, show comparability.
Thank you. Maybe as a follow-up, I was going to ask, Kumar, we were chatting earlier about, as an institution, you have a lot of different investigators you work with. What's kind of the criteria for taking them to the clinic or beyond, like toward, which ones you think have commercial potential? How do you determine that? Is it strictly based on early results or in the phase one, or?
Yeah. So yeah, we do support 15 IND. We do support manufacturing for 15 INDs, as I was telling you earlier, and these INDs, they are TIL, alpha beta CAR T, gamma delta CAR T. So we do work with wide variety of cell types that we support manufacturing for early phase, right? And what you're asking is how do we support them going through late stage and pivotal?
And there may be, let's say, limited resources, or you have to pick and choose.
Yeah.
When it gets to that point.
It all comes down to the signal that you're getting in early phase trial, for sure. And also, during that early phase trial, from my experience, what I can say is you have to be very careful about certain items, certain pieces. In the manufacturing, one critical quality attributes that define your product. You have to be very mindful of how robust they are. They have to be robust so that you believe in the signal that you're getting in early phase trial. And also the process and analytical parameters that control the CQAs, you have to have a pretty good handle on those so that whatever you're getting out of your early phase trial, you believe in the data. You should be able to believe in the data. And you should be able to believe in that data when you have control on the CQAs and the process and analytical parameters that define those. You have to have a pretty good control on that. Without having control on them, you can't believe the data, and then you can't decide whether you want to move that particular trial into late stage or not. So,
one of the things that I think is difficult in some of these more complex advanced therapies is we think we have a product that has critical quality attributes that are important, but you don't really know until you've put them into patients and you've seen the responses. And you can then learn from the translational data that you get, oh, this is actually what good looks like. And until you have that human clinical data, you don't really know. So I agree with Poe, investing too early, you might have more control over your process, but it may not be a good process.
and just to add to, exactly. Early phase, we know the things can be flexible in early stage trials. So don't spend too much time trying to, lock down everything. You can't lock down everything in early phase trial because things are going to be flexible. You're going to change your processes as you go into late stage trial. That's inherent to cell therapy programs. So don't spend too much time. Don't spend too many resources trying to lock down everything. You can't lock down everything in early phase trials, which is what you are referring to. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Next one, maybe a little bit of a related question. We talked about phase appropriateness. Question, I'm going to go to Greg first on this one. It's about balancing kind of your near-term constraints with generating value quickly. I know a lot of companies want to go really fast. They want to get to the clinic quickly or get to commercial quickly. And I'm sure if it's a CDMO, they probably push you like, how quickly can you get this done? How do you balance that speed with being ready to advance?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think it kind of builds on the conversation we were having. A lot of our clients are coming to us. They need to get to the next value inflection point, and it's not just a matter of a nice to have. It's existential for them. They need to get to that next milestone in order to get the funding to take it to the next level. So if you overinvest early on, then you may not have a company to get to the next stage. So I think to me it comes down to it's a quality by design kind of problem, really. I mean, you need to understand your product enough so that you set yourself up for success in the future. What you don't want to do is get there very quickly and do what we call incur a lot of tech debt, a lot of technology debt, where maybe you've cut some corners. Your in vitro model, your animal data is very come in a simplistic way. You don't maybe the manufacturing process you used is not scalable or reproducible. Then when you get to that next stage, you realize you can't reproduce what you generated early on, and that's where you don't want to be, right? So the key is how do you invest the right amount early on? Make sure you're focusing on the right areas that kind of focus you on the attributes of your product which you think are most likely to be important. How do you focus on the essence of that, but then allow you to get to that next stage and value inflection. And I think another thing you can think about is, are there other ways to gain efficiencies in your technology transfers that don't require you to make trade-off decisions like that? I mean, one thing, with my parent company, Artist Biosolutions, we recently acquired a company, Singoi, which does synthetic DNA manufacturing, with the idea being if we can, under one roof, bring the ability to make the DNA template and then also manufacture the viral vectors or the cell therapies, that's a way to streamline things for our clients, but do it in a way where they're not, you have a scalable GMP solution for the future, so you're not mortgaging the future to get where you need to go quickly. So I think you could look for efficiencies in other places beyond kind of cutting corners on the science.
Thank you.
I always think of it as 3 different buckets. There's always cost, timeline, quality. You can't have 3. You can only pick 2. That's how I always see it. You can have cost, quality, time. If you want cost and time, you have to compromise quality. If you want cost and quality, you have to compromise your timeline. If you want time and quality, you have to pour money into it. So it's always that balance of those 3 things that you really have to find where are you at in terms of the life cycle of your program, in terms of the stage of your company, the funding that you have. Those 3 buckets are always what you're trying to balance, and you're always tweaking.
One thing, just to kind of build on that, I think the quality piece, having that quality by design mindset of like, well, a lot of the tools you use in quality by design are really focused on helping you understand where your gaps are and where you should focus your efforts. And really that's what you need to do early on, is you need to focus your efforts in the most impactful areas. So I agree with the sentiment, you can't solve for all 3 simultaneously, but what you don't want to do is invest your areas in low value add, quality ads. You want to kind of focus on where can I add the most value from a quality perspective and do that. So that's why I've always been a big advocate for those quality by design tools.
Thank you. Do you want to jump in on that one?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And then the cost, right? You have to consider cost and time, I think, are critical in this stages. You've got to move forward, to your point. If you don't, right, if you spend too much, you may not have a company to move forward. But I mean, you need that flexibility in that space to experiment, to try some things, to move quickly. But I think the idea around flexibility really centers on standardization. What can you standardize on? There are some things that you can make trade-offs on early on, right, which don't destroy the timeline or the cost. And if you think about those things too late, you really don't have the flexibility that you need, because once you move into that commercial manufacturing space, you may want to manufacture this in multiple sites in multiple ways. And if you've destroyed that flexibility early, it's really hard. It's an uphill battle that, again, you may reach that stage where you don't have a company, right, because you have to invest too much to get to that flexibility. So I'd say think about what you can standardize, right? It can be how you capture data, right? There can be tools, templates, methodologies, quality by design standards. Can you adopt some of those that work and then scale those? It doesn't have to be everything, right? It's ridiculous to think you're going to standardize everything up front, but I like things in 3s, right? 3s are helpful to think about. What are those 3 things that you can standardize on early, not to create more process or to slow you down, but to help you go faster later and have that flexibility?
Kind of a spin-off to that question for you, I guess, about, you mentioned technology. Is that do you find it to people, every site, every company has their own preferences on how they store data or capture data, and do you have to navigate that, like getting them to kind of coalesce on,
Yeah, that's an easy one. Yes, right. I think everybody has a different model, and I'm sure, whether you're in the data space or not, if you, open your phone, read anything in the news, it's data fabric and data warehouse and data lakes and all of the cool buzzwords that are out there. And they are all pretty cool of how we do that, especially with, AI applications that are popping up. But, you can't have a panel and not talk about AI, but AI is only as good as the data that feeds it. And that is also appropriate here in this discussion, right? Think about when you get to the future and you're going to go into this commercialization stage, what are you going to feed AI so that it has the data? It probably could read stacks of paper, right? We could get to that point, which is helpful. But thinking about what are those things you can do early on to create this data framework. I'm not going to throw the buzzword of data fabric out there, because that's, when you get to that stage, super critical, and it is a real game changer. But early on, it's what do you want to standardize, and how do you start creating those elements that can go into a full data architecture later?
Thank you. So next, I'm going to move on to thinking about things more from a commercial perspective, or getting ready for commercial. I'm going to go back to Greg on this one. You mentioned from a CDMO perspective, what what is a good transfer? Like, what do you want to see from a client? And then I guess two-part question there. Second part question is it easier to transfer something in when they're at commercial stage, assuming they have a lot more data, a lot more, more of a robust process at that point? Is that easier, or is it actually easier to transfer it earlier?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, an ideal client would know the product very well and know their process very well. I think the reality is that especially phase appropriate, when you're dealing with a very young company, chances are they don't know either very well yet. But I think the most important thing for me and a client is having a client who understands what they do and don't know. And so working with companies who understand where their gaps in their knowledge are kind of willing to kind of like hear feedback and think about things about how things could be done in a way to streamline. I think that's really helpful with the customer. I think the question of whether it's easier to transfer in something that's commercial or nearly commercial, I think goes back to a little bit of how did they get to that stage where they got to be commercial, nearly commercial, because if it happened sort of in a isolation and then doesn't fit the realities of how it needs to be done in a GMP environment, then that can be counterproductive, because chances are you're going to have to make some changes, and so but if you have good, strong data and understanding, you can navigate that, especially in the biologic space. Quality by design sort of approaches, I think you can navigate comparability hurdles like that. It's a little harder in cell therapy, where again, you don't necessarily know what's critical about your product as much as you would like to. So making changes at the late stage there can be a little riskier. So I think, partnering with your manufacturing partner you intend to commercialize with early has its benefits to make sure that you don't have any curveballs kind of at the last minute.
So maybe go to Nikki on that one as well. So transferring something at commercial stage, like what's the technology aspect of that? Is that more challenging or easier?
Yeah, and I think what you touched on is like, is it easier because you've, to commercialize at that stage? Or not? Nothing about tech transfer is easy in any stage. I think we would all agree on that one. But at that stage, you've proven the science, and it's not really tech transfer so much, and we make it sound pretty easy of just take what we figured out and transfer it over. There's the humans in the loop. To your point, you have to bridge those relationships, but that's where technology is an enabler for those human relationships, because it's not just, click a button, there it goes, right? You can free up those people's time to build those relationships and follow up on it if you've given them the tools to make that technology easier. But it's a confidence transfer at that point, right? You've proven the science, it works, you have your clinical data, you know what you want to do, but how do you transfer the confidence that, yes, you've proven it, that we're going to transfer it to this site and manufacture it in this way and maintain the integrity of those early stages? And so that's not all technology as much as we would like it to be. It's also that human interaction. So, I can't stress enough to build those human relationships with your, who are your manufacturing partners across your teams, your, human silos that exist within your organizations. It's so easy to just get caught up in what you're trying to do and then the timeline and feel that pressure. But building those human relationships so that you can transfer the confidence from what you've proven over to that manufacturing scale is critically important. Obviously technology is a huge enabler. You can make some of those decisions, but it's really about how do you transfer that confidence?
I would also add that there is also the regulatory aspect that needs to be considered when you're in the commercial phase, right? When you're in the early phase of your clinical trial, making changes is actually a lot easier as compared to when you're actually in commercial stage. When you're trying to change your manufacturing process, when you're trying to change your analytical method, when you're at a commercial stage, the bar is significantly higher. I've actually seen a cell therapy product that is already in commercial that actually still uses manual hemocytometer to count the cells. And it takes 3 hours just to do a cell count viability, because you actually have to have 3 different operators doing the count 3 times each. And just to switch over to an automated counting process was such a high bar when you're already in the commercial stage. And then similarly, when you actually try to take into consideration your regulatory strategy, it's important to actually think about it in the early stage all the way through. What is your long-term regulatory strategy? Take, for example, I was part of a program at Sema Therapeutics, and now it's acquired by Vertex, where we develop pluripotent stem cells differentiated into pancreatic beta cells. They had one continuous trial whereby the efficacy data from their phase 1 clinical trial could be applied all the way to the pivotal study. Why is that possible? Well, the only reason is because they didn't change anything after that. If you try to change your manufacturing scale, if you were to try to change different things in between, you're not going to be able to take that same efficacy data that you actually use and apply it all the way to your pivotal study. So that regulatory strategy needs to start from the beginning. You don't wait until you go commercial, then you start thinking about that regulatory part.
Thank you. Maybe last question on this this section. We'll say we talked a little bit about, I guess, the give and take between the giver and the receiver. A question for Kumar, I guess, giving the giver and the receiver. So who owns a tech transfer ultimately? Would you say who owns the success there?
Yeah, great question, which goes to the blame game that happens between both parties, right? But I think it's the collaboration. You know, who owns the ownership? Not one side or not one party, like sending side or receiving side. Not one team can own the whole responsibility. It's a teamwork. It's a collaboration. I think I'll throw some buzzwords out there: governance, accountability, and defined path of escalation. Those need to be aligned with between both the parties, because the sending site is where the process originated, right? So they know the process better than anyone else, right? So when they transfer the process to the receiving side, they have to make sure they follow it diligently and also be accurate and precise in the transfer that they are doing. They should do their best. And now the receiving side, they have their responsibility. Once they get the transfer, once they get the knowledge from the sending side, they have to execute it precisely and make sure they meet the quality standards in alignment with the sending site. So it's both parties, you know. And within manufacturing, we know there are multiple groups involved. There is analytics, there is QA, there is manufacturing team. All these teams are part of tech transfer. So each of the team owns some part of the responsibility. So I think that at the end of the day, again, it's the governance, accountability. Accountability needs to be very clear between both the parties. And also governance structure needs to be very clear right from the beginning. If the accountability is not clear and the governance is there, then it will drift. The tech transfer will drift. It won't be accurate. So all these need to be aligned so that the ownership is clear between both the parties. Not any one single party owns the whole tech transfer success or failure.
Thank you. Just have a couple seconds left here. Maybe following from Po, your point about the regulatory aspects, I just wanted to ask a current events question here. You may have seen, there was an FDA announcement that they, just last month, I think they were going to take a more flexible approach on the CMC side of things for cell and gene therapy. To anyone on the panel, initial thoughts on that? Is that good, I guess, good news, or what do you think about it? So.
I think it's a welcoming news for sure. But again, whatever you need to do in early stage, things haven't changed for that for sure. And for late stage, I think from my perspective, other members can add. When you file the BLA, now from that announcement, it looks like FDA is willing to work more with the sponsors in tweaking certain things. They are a bit more flexible than what they used to be in the past. So that's the good news from my perspective, but I'll let others comment.
Yeah, I think the proof will be in the pudding, right? So that was an announcement. I wouldn't say it's a guidance, and it's not clear that the staffers who are doing the day-to-day review have read it.
Thank you.
I would say, just building on that, I think a lot of what's in that is really leveraging the tools that are already available, but then kind of a commitment to double down and actually use the tools. So to your point, it's going to come down to the pudding,
Okay. So I think that's probably all it's about all the time we have. So I'd like to thank the panelists very much, and then we'll have one more session coming up that I'll announce briefly. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.